Jehan is here as my friend to talk about a gift that she gave me recently that we have both been impacted by, that we wanted to share with everybody because it's just that kind of thing that you couldn't have imagined before it came to your life. But it's one of those great expressions. Following up on our conversation with Pima County Supervisor Ramon Valadez in the first hour of action, and where that action is gratitude, and how you can be really impactful by living and sharing that gratitude. And this conversation we are going to share with Jehan is a conversation of gratitude, come to life. That's her inspiration. That's how she trickles into my world, is with great gratitude and gratitude. Jehan, welcome.
How are you? So good to talk to you. What an introduction, as always. Thank you so much. I guess I better get to sending that book to my editor real soon, huh? So no pressure.
No, I realize when you came here not long ago, you came and you gave a gift to this community. You traveled here to do a seminar, a workshop. And it was a really specific kind of workshop that I would like you to tell people about, because it is representational of the kind of broader work you do in the corporate communications, in the corporate training, in the public speaking, in all of the work that you do. And when you're a many hyphenate, as you are, on the leading edge of thought in an area where there's, sort of scant, accurate, comprehensive identification and labeling to say easily, this is who you are and this is what she does. How do I explain to people sort of who you are and what your mission is and what you do?
Gosh, that's a wonderful question. I always like to tell the story that I started out as a flight attendant, but I wasn't being fulfilled in what I was doing. Your former guest, Ramon, talked about action. I felt that while we touch many lives at 36,000 feet, I still did not feel fulfilled. I felt like there was something more I needed to be doing. So as I indicated to your audience on an earlier show, metaphysics has always been a part of my life. My mom studied metaphysics. And in her death, as I was cleaning out her apartment, I found even more treasures and secrets about this beautiful sort of world that I guess she didn't feel comfortable enough or just very overt about it, but it was certainly in the household in which we grew up. So one of the things that I do to answer your first question, I came to Tucson to host a 6-part series of workshops, and the one in which I met you was the tail end of it, and that was Revolt, Resist, Restore, how to reclaim your, and forgive me, I forget the exact title that I named it, but how to reclaim your power and your self-esteem in this sort of political climate and this Me Too and Time's Up climate. And a friend of mine and I brainstormed, and we thought about the title because of what women are going through today and how powerful our voices are, and just that needed oomph of confidence and the impetus behind sort of getting our voices out there so that we're no longer silenced. And to, again, as Ramon was talking about that, he said he read in John Maxwell's book, to raise the collective consciousness. At the end of the day, the only answer is love.
Mm-hmm. When you were flight attendant and you had the myriad complex duties of ensuring the safety and well-being and transport, et cetera, of the passengers, as with a very, I'm going to use that as a very representational job, because we all have some job where we're responsible for like multiple things at the same time. dualities, competing interests. We're all juggling whatever the reality that we live in is. And finding ways to do each of the things with love and intention and gratitude and all the most positive things that let us be our best selves in all of that is challenging enough. And to do it in a culture and a climate that is incredibly black and white, win or lose, good and bad, that makes it even tougher. And then tack on to that life happens. And some days you're hungry. And some days your allergies are kicking up. And some days there's other things to consider. And so it's really powerful to be realistic and say, how can we best do the things where we can be closer to our best selves, in spite of the fact that today I've got allergies, or I didn't get enough sleep because my neighbors made noise, or something else was going on, and it's harder for me today to be my best self. But there are some places we can go, some resources we can avail ourselves of, and things we can do to recalibrate, reset, and remind ourselves, as you did in that seminar, how we can restore and, in a sense, revolt against the mindless repetition of something that is a habit or a default, and actively make an action to choose to be more positive by doing some of the things that we know actually work for us in our self-awareness. And one of those things is to share with people the gratitude that we have.
Yep.
And how you and I became acquainted was in your openness and gratitude for the moment where you were in Tucson. And I wanted to give you the chance to translate how you presently live in gratitude and live what you dream to do more actively than when perhaps you were a flight attendant with all those competing interests. And what's the lesson for all of us in your own example?
One of the things Ramon just said was talking about to believe. Break that word down means to be alive. What is it that you're doing every day to be alive? And if the saying goes, if you just touch one person, but I like how he said, if you're only touching one person, you need to do more. So one of the ways that you and I connected the most was Dr. Joseph Murphy. And he's a New Thought minister and ordained. He's ordained in divine and religious sciences. And the way I'll tell the story about how I came across Dr. Murphy is I was on YouTube looking for something else, and Spirit said to me, click on this audiobook right now and start listening to it. And I got to tell you, I haven't stopped listening yet. Mm-hmm. And the crux of what his teaching is, it's all about the power of your subconscious. And I love how you just said that, to find our way when you don't want to get out of bed, or when you don't want to, you have a cold, or, you have a 5 a.m. van and your neighbors running up and down the hall. How do you move past that? And it's all about your belief system and how to be alive. And our subconscious is what calls the shots, whether we know it or not. And I'd like to, I wrote this quote down. One of the things that Dr. Murphy says is that the wisdom and the power of your subconscious works at the level of your belief. So whatever it is that you believe, how are you being alive, will essentially dictate what's going on in your life and whatever it is that you want. And that's really it. Faith and confidence. Be alive. Believe. Whatever you need to know will be provided for you. The creative intelligence, our subconscious, will respond to us with our faith and confidence.
And P.S., it knows better than we do. So best get out of the way.
Yeah. We are all one. Here's the connectedness. whether it's, however you feel about our current administration, I will continue to bring that up because he is not separate from you or I, the man down the street, those people running up and down the hall, your pilot, the gate agent. Again, our core is love. It's compassion. It's gratitude. I'm frustrated that, someone's running up and down the hall. Be grateful that you have a place to sleep that night.
Mm-hmm.
Be grateful that you have a job to go to in which you have to catch a 5 a.m. van. There's always a silver lining. My food was cold at the restaurant. I'm grateful that I had the money to go out and enjoy a meal out. And that's not to say that you don't deserve hot food or food that you paid for that you'd like to enjoy, but there's always something to be grateful in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I live my life. I try to anyway.
We're going to take a break in just a minute, but we're talking about the books of Joseph Murphy. And Joseph Murphy was widely considered one of the pioneering voices of affirmative thinking philosophy, something that we almost take for granted today. He was a Doctor of Divinity and a PhD, so he was a double D. And he was someone who passed away in 1981. So this is not new.
No.
But what's so interesting is that it is a body of work over several books, some of which can be found and heard online. And you turned me on to something, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, as the audiobook. And like you, I haven't stopped listening to it, and it's made a profoundly impactful thought shift in my mind and in my spirit. But you want to know how these crazy things happen?
Yeah.
I went looking for the book because I was listening to it online. And I'm the kind of person who I got to go back because my brain doesn't move as fast as his words.
Me too.
So I need
Sure.
to, I'm an old-fashioned girl. I need a copy of the book. And not only do I want a copy of the book, I need to get my yellow highlighter out. And I want to highlight some pages and passages. And then, you know what I want to do? I'm going to go completely over the edge. And I'm going to take my pen and write on paper and retranslate for myself, because the act of writing it for me makes a difference.
Me too.
I have to go write this down. So I went looking for the book. And a friend of mine, who is an awesome human being, got in the car and said, I will take you. Let's go find that book. So first we went out and we had breakfast together and we shared a meal together and we talked about life and what it means to live in this time and space and what I was really questing for. And I was talking about this book. I don't own this book. And this is unusual because I own like 5,000 books. Now, granted, they're almost all cookbooks, but I've got other books too. But I live in a book town. Tucson is a book town. It was a big book town. We've got the Tucson Festival of Books. Now, some people say, well, you've got too many books. Well, that might be true. But I don't think you can ever have too many books, because you know what I do with all my books? I turn around and I give people books all the time that I'm told this person really would like to own this book and cook from this book and have this. So I give books to people all the time. I've got a couple of friends, big fancy doctors, that when they would come over and visit me, they would go immediately to there was a section where they knew the books that were coming to be on the show would be. So they're like, oh yeah, let's go look at the new books. And I'm always giving books to people. So you can't have too many books, but I'm digressing. So I'm making the point that I've got lots of books, but I didn't have this book. Mm-hmm. And after you told me to listen to this book, I'm listening to the book online, but I need to have a tangible copy. So my friend says, let's go find a copy. So we go to Bookman's, and then we go to the other Bookman's. And Bookman's is a used bookstore that's an entertainment exchange where if you're going to find a book anywhere, likely it's at Bookman's. So I went to a couple Bookman's, couldn't find the book. Then I went to the manager, and they called all the other Bookman's. None of them had this book. And it's unusual because Dr. Joseph Murphy didn't write just one book. He wrote several books. We'll get a count in the next break. Couldn't find any of his books. Went to Antigone Books, went to Barnes & Noble's, went to every place you could think of, went to that fantastic used bookstore on 4th Avenue right down by the Libertine. Couldn't find this book to save my life. I walk back in to the place where I'm staying. And do you know what's sitting on the table? And no one else had access to this place.
Mm-hmm.
The Cosmic Energizer, The Miracle Power of the Universe by Dr. Joseph Murphy. The Techniques of the Ancients for Tapping the Eternal Source of Creativity. It is a modern day edition of a book that was originally published in, I want to say, 1974. So I want you to imagine something. I don't own this book. I've never seen this book before in my life. I meet you, you tell me to go and listen to this. I listen. I decide I need the book. I go hunting for the book. Now, this isn't the exact volume, but how did this book just end up on my counter?
Well, you know how.
Well, I don't, but I do. But I accept it, and I'm grateful. That's why we're talking about this today. That's why we're here having this conversation, and that's why we're sharing it, because it's meant to be shared. And if you need to know about this, you're listening to AM 1030 The Voice, trusted local news and talk. This is Around the Table, live from the City of Gastronomy. We will take your calls and questions, 520-790-2040. We will be back with more right after this. Our friend is here to help us, and you are here to help us, and we are here to help you, and that's just how it goes. We'll be back with more right after this. It's 2:29 p.m. and we are live from the City of Gastronomy. This is lunchtime. This is Around the Table, and around the table with us are the most interesting and influential tastemakers, newsmakers, style makers, lawmakers, movers and shakers, healers, foodies, and friends. Joining us is my friend. I'm very, very privileged and proud to have her joining us. And I must say, I want to make sure we get her website in here too, because to really understand the work that she does in the role that she plays for a varied corporate audience and clientele, she takes the idea that must have been born, and maybe she's already thought about this, but I've got to wrap this all together. As someone she was a flight attendant on one of the major airlines. And in that role, you're concerned first and foremost with well-being and safety, and then getting somebody from point A to point B. And I can't help but notice that the journey is no longer terrestrial but metaphysical, and that on some level she's a spiritual flight attendant getting us safely from point A to point B.
I love that.
You know,
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
You know, and it's really not, it's not that different a gig.
No.
You know, I mean, you're showing us, you're holding up a card and saying, okay, in the unlikely event that there's going to be something really emergent taking place, I'll get you through it. But here's some basic things you need to know about. You know?
It's soul travel.
Yeah.
It's how we're showing up in the world. And SOUL stands for an acronym, and that's one of the courses that I teach. I have a series of 3 workshops, if you will, for my private clientele. And it goes from safer travel, which is an acronym, and then smarter travel. And then the soul travel is, soul stands for source of universal love, again, which is the impetus behind everything that we should be doing, which is love. How are we showing up in the world? Believe, to be alive. And as you indicated earlier, before the break, you talked about how Dr. Murphy has a series of books. I mean, I probably, like you, lost count. And they all have a common thread, but they all say different things. And my new favorite one, and we'll certainly talk more about that because I'll probably be sending this book as well, but I think it's out of print, but I think I found a couple. And it's Telephysics, Tapping into Your Hidden Subconscious Powers. And this, Jennifer, I have to tell you, is my favorite of all of them. And I'm probably on like the 10th book right now in the last, since we've introduced this book to one another. And what has it only been 2 weeks? And I'm on the 10th book already.
Yeah.
Like, I am absolutely, as the kids say these days, standing for Dr. Joseph Murphy. Like, it's when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I've been doing this work, as we talked about, for quite some time now. But this book was right on time, or this this teacher, if you will, this mentor. And like you said, he died in 1981. This man was born in 1898. I'm going to tell my age here. I was 5 years old when this man died. So, like, some 30 odd years later, his teachings and his work and his ministry is still very prevalent and relevant to us in this day and age. My mother used to always say, there's nothing new under the sun. And I'm just so forever grateful that for YouTube and for me, for the spirits, first of all, and then me having an ear to hear and listen when they said, nope, I need you to click on this man's audiobook right now. And again, both of our lives, from what you said, have been forever changed. And I've been telling everybody about this book who will listen.
When you look at the body of work, and I mean, there's like, I don't know, I lost count at like 35 books, and there's probably more.
Yeah.
Some of which were produced and published posthumously. But they come back to these core ideas that are built around what I'll call like the mega book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. But the ideas in them are all
work.
Right. The ideas of them are all really similar. They have to do with healing. They have to do with transformation. They have to do with, on some level, understanding that the way to get stuff done is to surrender to it, not to force it. I mean, there's some really easy ways to offer it as an idea. Talk a little bit about how you're processing to headline the work that you're reading in the books of Joseph Murphy. Because I think there's a headline that each of us takes away when we delve and dive deep into a subject or an author. And when you find an author that really speaks to you in a language that you really get, you not only begin to understand it for yourself, you begin to translate it into terms that are your own terms. How is that happening for you?
Thoughts become things. And this is something that I've learned and read from your Earl Nightingales, your Esther and Abraham Hicks, Wayne Dyers, Marianne Williamson, Carolyn Myss. They're all saying the same thing, but what resonates the most with me, because I did grow up in the church, and what I like about Dr. Murphy's books is that he incorporates Bible verses, but he breaks the Bible verses down for you. When he talks about man and wife, he's talking about your mind. You being your mind is the marriage to your subconscious, and thoughts become things. And that's what's been resonating with me the most, is that every thought I think, every word I speak is a prayer, a petition, an affirmation. I don't have to tell anybody who's been here in L.A. about 405 traffic. Someone cuts you off. You think to call them a name, or you act out in frustration or anger. And that's given me, after reading these books and just constantly absorbing this information in a repetitive way, to think before I speak, to pause, and in that moment, did that person cut me off? Or are they going home to a sick child? Did they just receive some information or some news that was threatening to them and their livelihood? So we don't always know what's going on in someone else's life. So it's just, Jehan, take pause. Not everything is about you. Mm-hmm. Thoughts become things. Mm-hmm. And that's a headline for me in my life.
The reason I ask you is because, as somebody who goes out and then teaches and shares generously with your clients and with the groups that you speak to, you tend to be able to teach with a clarity of interpreting big, complex ideas and translating them in language that your audience, your friends, people like me, when we hear you and the words that you share with us, your words resonate deeply with ideas that embed in our hearts and our heads and drive us in these journeys to places where we're learning and continuing to grow and ask these questions. So when you translate these big ideas into something as simple as, thoughts become things and you can have an active role, tell me about how you read these ideas, these really big, complex ideas. Do you see yourself? Do you see other people? Do you see big patterns when you're reading something like this? Because you agreed to be on the show today to talk about a book written by a guy who died almost 40 years ago.
Right.
And a book that was published almost 60 years ago.
Jennifer is not me. And I don't want to qualify here, but I have to say, it may sound trite, but true, it's not me. Every day I wake up, God, move me, use me. How many people can I serve? What's our message today? God is my co-pilot. He's the pilot. I'm the first officer, right? Move me, use me. So God, speak through me. What is the message that you want me to give to whoever needs to hear this? Who can I serve? How many people can I serve? Every day when I wake up, and then before I cross the threshold as I'm grabbing my keys and grabbing my purse. When I ground and clear, obviously, and I do some other things, and I do a zip up and I say a prayer. When I say zip up, meaning I zip up and I protect my energy and I put mirrors around me that anything that is not for my best and highest good to not only reflect back to the person who is giving it, but transmute it back into loving energy. And from that, it's just become, it's me and God's thing, if you will, for lack of I can't say it any, more
right.
eloquently than that. It's God, okay, what are we doing today? And it's so not me. I'd love to take credit, but just constant prayer. How can I be of service? And I said the last time I was on your show, Muhammad Ali says, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. I really take that to heart. How can I pay my rent today, God? How can I pay my rent? How can I serve? How many people can I serve today? Who can I uplift today?
You grew up in the church. You're using the word prayer. And I think if someone is hearing this, automatically it might remind them or sound like we're talking about something religious, and we're not. And that's where this gets tricky, because this is bigger than religion in a way, but it is what it is. How do you explain to somebody that this isn't the tradition you grew up with, this isn't anything other than, the simplicity of what it is? How do I explain this to make someone want to go get one of these books and understand, if they're curious to make this question.
Take this leap of faith to pick up this book. Like, why am I listening to these women? And, what is going to drive them over the edge to be interested in this?
Well, how is it any different than somebody listening to Tony Robbins or to Dr. John Maxwell? Or, this is the reason I wanted to have you come and talk about this, is because you gave me this gift. But it's like a lot of other things that are out there. And what I'm hoping is that in the conversation that we have today, that someone's going to hear this and be a little bit curious about it. But the bigger issue is, how can all of us do more to become more aware of who we are and what our mission is, and how do we do whatever we're supposed to be doing here on this planet? Because no matter whether you're religious or not, everyone's figuring out, is the whole reason I'm here just to make a bunch of money? Is the whole reason I'm here to be a good teacher? Is the whole reason I'm here to be a doctor or a lawyer or a radio host? Whatever it is. That's how the question starts getting asked.
Well, okay. So using that G word, and that may, scare some people away, as you indicated. So I'll address that first. And I so love your mind. And when people start doing this sort of work together, our souls are connected, and we speak even when we don't speak. So right. I wrote this down. One of the things Dr. Murphy said was, man created the various religious creeds, religious rituals, and dogmas. God existed before any man walked the earth or before any church was ever formed. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So it's man that created Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. We're talking about God who created us. And even if you are atheist, and I do have friends who are atheists that say, I do believe in a higher spirit. I just do not believe in religious dogma. And I'm like, okay, fair. We're meeting in the middle there. So you do understand that there is a being or a higher infinite intelligence that's the reason why we're here. And they'll usually say yes. The infinite intelligence, though, and it may kind of seem tricky, is within us. So praying to a pie in the sky, and this may ruffle some feathers of some people. And like I said, I grew up in the church, so I get it. But this has totally reframed my thinking. I still believe in God. I know that there's a God. But here's the thing. God created us in his likeness, his or her likeness, God, goddess. So why am I looking outside myself when God created us in his likeness? Everything that I need, every question I need to be answered is within me. It's the stillness of your mind, petition and prayer, whether you call it prayer, petition. When you say that person is beautiful, that is a prayer. That's a petition. You just put out into the ethos, the universe, that you are showing love to someone else. Every thought we think, every word we speak is an affirmation, a prayer, a petition. Jennifer, I love you. That's a petition. That's a prayer. I'm sending love your way. At the end of the day, love is all that matters. So that's to answer that question. And then you asked, what is it that we're here to do? To make a bunch of money? We've been taught that money is ugly. Dr. Murphy talks about that too. We're put on this planet to make a lot of money. To be poor is a sickness in our mind. To be poor is actually against what God has for us. So it's whatever you want to be. If you want to be a dog catcher, join the circus. If you want to be a CEO, if you want to be on the radio, you can do whatever you want. Impressing upon your subconscious mind, get still, create a plan, but it doesn't even have to be hard. If you say, I declare I want to be, I am going to be, I determine that I am going to be from this day forward a doctor, and you set in motion, your only thoughts are being a physician, the universe and the earth and ground and God will move with you because you have declared, this is what I've been put on this earth to do, and the universe will set in motion all of the resources you need to make this come true because you made this declaration. And again, the trees, ants, you and I, the birds, we're all the same. So it's going to set in motion whatever it needs to do. You'll find the right books. You'll find the money. You'll find the tuition. You'll get the car if you want to drive across the country to be admitted into Yale. We just have to have faith and impress it again upon our subconscious. This is what I want, and I will accept nothing less. And you'll get what you want. It really is that simple. We really make it harder than it has to be.
We're going to be back right after this next break, and we're going to ask Jehan if she would be good enough to help me explain what I think is the hardest thing of all. When you come up in a culture where you are rewarded for perseverance and hard work, the hardest thing to imagine is if you try less. One of my personal mottos and one of my family mottos was, we try harder. The hardest lesson of all for me was not trying so hard. It's part of where we live. It's part of the reward in a culture that says if you want something, you got to work really hard for it. And if you dedicate yourself to it and you persevere, you will get everything you ever dreamed of. Well, it's not that easy. In fact, it's easier. We'll be back with more right after this. This is Around the Table, live from the City of Gastronomy on AM 1030 The Voice. Trusted local news and talk, KVOI. We'll be right back. It's 2:51 p.m. as we're wrapping up this edition of Around the Table, where we've invited the most interesting and influential tastemakers, newsmakers, style makers, movers, shakers, healers, foodies, and friends. We're thrilled to welcome my very dear friend for a conversation about a topic that I am very keen to talk about. Jehan's here. And I want to remind everybody that every Monday when Pima County Supervisor Ramon Valadez joins us, he does so in the hopes that we send the week off on this trajectory of really positive thought. And we do that, I think, because it certainly sends me off in that realm. And when we find resources and things that impact us as much as the books of Dr. Joseph Murphy have in a very short amount of time, and you got to remember, people have been sending me books for years. There are very few things that have crossed my path in the last 25 years that have been so impactful. But then again, I haven't met somebody as impactful as you. You know, I'm apprehensive only because do you tell people what your last name is? How do you want people to come and find you? Because your website's amazing, but it's also kind of discreet.
I go by Jehan Sicily. Funny story, I was named after, first name, Anwar Sadat's wife, Jehan Sadat. My mother named me after two very strong women, and I was named, my middle name is Cicely Tyson. I go by my first and middle name because, believe it or not, Jehan Watson, the domain name, was taken. And if you can believe that.
That's how things happen.
I never liked my middle name growing up. So this is sort of an homage to my mother, if you will, is why I go by my first and middle name now. And
that's so funny.
So it's JehanSicily.com, Jehan as in Nancy, CICELY.com. And that's where you can find me. But that's why I go by Jehan Sicily. And then it's my my stand-up comedian, and it's my professional name for acting, voiceovers, commercials, and
because in fact you're a talented performer and you're a comedian and you do voiceover work among other things, and you want to know how it all comes together. It comes together in an extraordinary way. You might not appreciate it, but all of the life experience that you've had comes to bear because you are somebody who can deliver messages unlike anybody I've ever met in my life.
Thank you. Very sweet.
Well, it's not sweet. It's like powerful. I'm glad you think it's sweet. It's ultra powerful. In that role, I'd like for you to address what I think may be the whole crux of the conversation we were hoping to have today, which is how is the hardest thing in the world to do the simplest thing in the world to do, and how is the simplest thing in the world to do the hardest thing in the world to do, which is take what you want, go after it without really going after it too hard. How do you not try so hard?
I got a little bit of a lump in my throat. It's to sum this all up, I have decided. Fill in the blank. It is really just that powerful. And you mentioned something before the break. You said you grew up in a family where you were always taught to work harder. I think the transformation there is really work smarter, not harder. And the smarter part of that is, that's not to say I have decided. Okay, for example, I have decided, again, we'll use the example of I want to be a physician. I have decided I am a physician. So that's not to say that you don't apply to the necessary schools, that you don't do the quote-unquote schoolwork, but you've already made it, you've decided in your mind that you will be a physician. So whatever comes your way, if it's you don't have a problem studying, but you don't have the money for the expensive textbooks, because you have decided, the money will be there. Mm-hmm. That's where the hard part, quote unquote, that's where we make it hard. I want to be a doctor, but I couldn't get into Yale because I don't have the
and
right
just
background.
In coming up with those excuses that you're using as examples of the things that people do to sabotage or limit themselves, alibis. How do we succinctly, and again, I don't know how to do this yet, but I think I've got something. Throughout all of the 30-plus books of Dr. Joseph Murphy, he does a really good job of giving lots of examples of how people have come up with the language to frame what they want And the one thing that I'm taking away from all of this, and my simple headline is, when you're ready and able to write your own, let's call it a prayer, but it could be your own statement.
Petition.
That petition, when you have the clarity to be able to see it and write it and say it yourself, is when you can write it and say it yourself. You can't read somebody else's words and live their life by making their dream come true for you, even if what you want is really similar. Because the key is not just saying the words, it's believing and feeling and knowing those words.
Agreed.
So to me, it's about getting to the place where you can be really clear about what it is. That clarity is important.
And to have the faith and the confidence. Well, someone might say, I don't know what that is. I don't have that. Like I said, I grew up going to church, and we're not talking like Bible thumping. Like, I used to walk and take myself to church because, again, my dad came home just really briefly from the Vietnam War, heartbroken, and said, I don't believe in God. My mother grew up in the church, so I was baptized Methodist, and I did a couple of stints, if you will, in Catholic school. But I would walk myself to church, or I'd get dropped off. So when I say I grew up in the church, it was me taking myself to church when I moved at 12 years old with my dad and my stepmom. So I went on my own volition because, again, there was something I was searching for. I needed this connectedness to God, right? So the declaration, again, is I have decided, I declare. And why I said to date, out of all of the books I've read thus far, the telepsychic book and psychic, don't let that scare you away. He explains it in such succinct detail that you don't feel stupid reading it. And he talks about, again, the power of our subconscious mind. He talks about, well, I don't know how to pray. I don't know any of this stuff.
Well,
he teaches you how
it's
to
here and
have
it's waiting
faith and
for
pray.
us. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us today. I love you. And just remember this, when you get home, please hug your kids and count your blessings.